Morning. Can you hear me all right at the back? Great stuff. Okay, so this is the second session of this day of architecture, and we have got two architectural visionaries with us this morning to discuss their different visions. We've got Sadie Morgan, who's one of the founding members of the extraordinary practice, dRMM. She's the final M, I think, Sadie, that's right, isn't it? Who I suppose really made an impression when they made, in 2003, with One Centaur Street, and then have gone on to make award-winning architecture. And also with Sadie, she's an incredible woman. She does incredible things, from cycling on behalf of raising the profile of women to being on the panel for NIC with Lord Adonis, for being the design head of HS2, and generally being a pretty remarkable woman with a pretty remarkable vision. And what she has to say, I'm incredibly interested to hear. Starting, though, will be Charles Holland, who is a really extraordinarily unique thinker. He founded FAT with 3 friends a few years ago, and then I met him at Grayson Perry's House for Essex, which is a wild Hansel and Gretel type space and place in which he collaborated very closely with Grayson to make, and has since left FAT. FAT has disbanded and set up a new architectural practice with a slightly ironic name of Ordinary Architecture. So Charles is going to start off by talking about 10 minutes. Sadie will then talk about 10 minutes. And then I think we can all have a chat. If you want to tweet at all, tweeting is a really good thing to do. It's at Ecobuild_now. So slightly clumsy, but quite important. At Ecobuild_now. Charles is going to talk about housing, its future, and what it should look like. Charles Holland.
Thanks, Will. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to talk about housing in relation to the idea of the visionary, I suppose, in a way. And in a sense, I want to sort of question that relationship a little bit, or what role the sort of visionary has in housing, because I think it's a little problematic. And I'm going to show 2 projects. One is houses. It's like a number of houses in a regeneration development. And one is a house. And both projects pursue an idea of houses as embodying or representing or growing out of the tastes and the desires of the people who live in them. So in some senses, you could almost see it as a sort of anti-visionary process of actually trying to find out the kind of ordinary things about people's lives that then informs the design of the houses they live in. And I'm going to start off with a kind of visionary image, which is a drawing by the French-Swiss modernist architect Le Corbusier. And it's a kind of polemical image which shows the role of architecture in reshaping society. It's kind of architecture as sort of social engineering. And in the image you can see the interior of this sort of very grand double height space, and there's a guy, the man who's sort of, as you do at home, practicing his boxing. And there's a woman looking down devotedly from the balcony where she's just maybe been beating a rug. And there's this kind of whole sense, there's amazing landscape in the background through the window. There's a kind of sense here that architecture can sort of change the world, and it can also change the way that we live. But the kind of reality of how we live is often a lot messier, a lot less utopian, and a lot less visionary. And this is a sort of different image about domestic life. And the kind of compromises and messiness of it. Like, we're not perfect individuals. We don't necessarily spend our days practicing boxing or cleaning metallic surfaces. We kind of watch telly and we eat and we make mess and we kind of have arguments and all these sorts of things. So I guess I'm very interested in what actually happens in houses and how that influences the design, and how as architects we can be responsive to that. So as I said, I wanted to show a couple of projects. And the first one is a group of houses that are designed quite a long time ago, maybe more than 10 years ago in Manchester, and in the area of Ancoats, and an estate that existed which is called the Cardroom Estate, which is an estate that was built in the 1970s. And the unique, or not unique, but very rare aspect of this project was that we worked with a group of residents who lived on this estate to design their new houses. And we worked very closely with them, trying to react to and respond to their tastes and the way that they lived. So we took a number of photos of their houses, and we started to use them to develop a kind of brief. And so we noticed lots of interesting things about the way that they lived. This is probably the most obviously notable, which is a dog, ceramic dog, and an air freshener, which interestingly was on the porch of a house, which says something about the relationship of the person who lived there and their attitude to the area around them, that it somehow needed kind of fumigating, or people needed to be sort of, kind of cleansed of the rest of Ancoats before they could come in. But there's also an interesting thing about the way people use decoration and ornament and signage to start demarcating personal space and personal territories. And this is an interior of one of the houses, which is an amazing interior, which is sort of someone's own kind of extraordinary architectural composition that we made. One of the observations we came out with from this project is that the older the resident, the more bonkers their personal taste was. So the younger residents tended to have, they'd watched maybe too many episodes of Grand Designs, and they'd started to kind of purify themselves of bad taste. And the older residents had much more kind of, almost like a sort of DIY aesthetic, where the house interior could become almost anything. So this one's got a bit of adobe, a bit of Tudor, a bit of sort of bust of Marie Antoinette. It's got a whole load of ceramic animals. It's got kind of everything you could possibly imagine. But we took this stuff very seriously as a way to start talking about taste and space, and how the interiors of the houses could start to reflect the way that the occupants lived. And very simple observations about the fact that we might separate, the children might have a floor that separate from the adults, and that they might have some kind of autonomy or privacy, that people kind of eat and cook together at the same time, and also maybe you can cook and look at your children are playing in a garden, and therefore there's a certain sort of relationship of those spaces, and also that people do things now that traditional houses didn't accommodate. One of those things is people working from home, so the idea that we might start to make spaces which everybody could use, and you could put a computer, and both the kids and the adults could use it, and it wasn't in anyone's bedroom. So it's the sort of intermediate spaces that reflect the kind of things that we do now. And then things about decoration and ornament, and how we might start to use them to create identity. And we made a series of quite flexible L-shaped houses that could be divided in different ways, so that the residents could have a degree of open planness or a degree of sort of separate rooms depending on how they wanted to live. And they could kind of flip the rooms around, so you could swap the dining room with the living room, etc. And they had a space which you could work from home, or you could have as a home office or a study. And those houses were arranged as a sort of pair of long terraces, which are a bit like a Georgian terrace but with some chunks cut out of it, or a series of semi-detached houses that have been united into one long row. And this is what they look like. They used kind of decoration on the outside, so they have they use brick pattern and applied decoration and ornament to start to give these houses a kind of character. And they use the profile of the front elevation to start to sort of describe individuality within the whole block. There's 23 houses in all, and each one is different, but they also have a collective style. And there's another view of it. You can see the way that the brick decoration is used as a sort of giant-sized pattern that comes in and out of focus depending on where you're viewing the house from. There's a delighted resident. This is actually the owner of the dog, which ended up outside in the garden, and we made he bred carp, and we made a kind of carp pond, which had to be wheeled across the road from his former house in a wheelie bin, and then put into this new little pond. And then the dog, maybe as some sort of gesture of friendship to the outside world, was now placed outside. Okay, so the other project is a house rather than a group of houses. And it has, again, it's sort of designed around a resident, but it's designed around a fictional resident. And in this case, it's designed around the woman in this picture, which is a tapestry by the artist Grayson Perry. Will mentioned that this project, which is called A House for Essex, was a collaboration between my practice, Fat, and Grayson to design a house which you can go and stay in, but really is about the life of a fictional character who was invented by Grayson. And she's called Julie Cope, and she's the woman in this tapestry which is in the house. But her life became a way to talk about what this house would be like. So again, the design of the house was about learning from somebody and somebody's taste. This little map, which is a drawing by Grayson, describes her life. And she was born in Essex, and she lives in various places across Essex. And through her life, she sort of takes a kind of journey across that county, which allows the house and the artworks in it to sort of talk about that place through a series of different kind of locations, and the house is sort of the end point of this kind of fictional journey. So this is the house. It's a very richly decorated and embellished house. Anyone who knows Grayson's work and may have seen the work of my work as well will know that I'm very interested in decoration, ornament, and pattern, and how those things can kind of bring, well, sort of give identity, but can also bring a kind of joy and delight and meaning to housing. And this house really kind of explores that in a kind of very extreme manner. It's completely clad in ceramic tiles which depict this character, Julie, and symbols of her life. It has a number of sculptures on the roof, which are also about her life, and it's in a very beautiful location in North Essex, which looks towards the River Stour and then Suffolk on the other side. This is a sort of view of it from the other side, and you can see the house explores an idea of kind of houseness. There's 4 house shapes which step up in scale. It's a 2-bedroom house inside that, yeah, as you can see, kind of explores the sort of idea of decoration and pattern. That idea of each individual kind of house shape getting bigger as you go through the house happens inside as well. So the section of the plan, you come in at the small end, which is this, and as you walk through the house, it gets kind of bigger until you arrive in the last space, which is a kind of a space we've described as a sort of chapel, which is about this woman's life, which is the most decorated and kind of heavily embellished space within the house, which is it. Statue in the middle is a ceramic sculpture by Grayson, which depicts her. She stands in a kind of timber screen, which has a series of doors that come into it. There's a very sort of theatrical house to stay in. When you come in and out of rooms, you sort of appear as if you've kind of arrived on a stage set. And you can see again the role of colour and pattern to sort of make a really kind of rich interior. This is the sort of view through the kitchen and dining room. And this sort of describes those 2 spaces. The kitchen has a huge wall of green tiles with 2 doors hidden in it. Also tiled, you burst through those and into that living room space. Okay, and that's it in the landscape. So really the purpose of showing those 2 houses, which are quite different really. One is a relatively tight budget social housing project for 23 individual families in Ancoats in Manchester, and the other is obviously quite a kind of high-end individual one-off house. But both, for me, explore an idea of relating to housing as something that grows out of the tastes and the life of the people that live in them. So, and that then gets expressed through not just how the houses are organised spatially and arranged, but through, yeah, the idea of employing decoration and architectural ornament to sort of give expression and life to those. So I hope that gives a sense of an approach to housing which could be seen as visionary, but in a way is also about learning from quite sort of humble things about how we all live and trying to translate them into houses that are sort of sensitive and responsive to that. That's me done. I'm going to hand over back to Will. Thank you very much.
That's great, Charles. I tell you, if you haven't been to the House of Essex, you've got to go there. It is the most amazing space and place. Now, we have got Sadie Morgan, who's going to talk to us for about 10 minutes again, and then after which we'll have a chat about what both architects have said, about a slightly different subject, about infrastructure, world-class, huge infrastructure projects, and the absolute vital importance that design and architecture is considered within those. Sadie Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you. Imagining what the future may look like, I imagine, is also a preoccupation of most of us in this room. Now think of the infrastructure needed to unpin that future, and it'll probably force you, like me, to lie down in a darkened room with a very wet towel over your face. Well, take that towel off, because all you need to do is look to the past to have faith. The UK has been at the forefront of infrastructure development from the age of steam to the development of the internet. Many of us still live in homes whose roads and sewers were laid down by the Victorians, when we built cities, canals, and railways with a pace and vigour that was awe-inspiring. Yet references to our glorious past can sometimes feel like a millstone. The vision and brilliance of Brunel haunts us as much as it inspires us. There's a perception that our ability to think big is diminished, and that it's other nations who get on and build things. The French with their high-speed trains, the Germans with their green energy revolution, and the Chinese with whichever mountain they've decided to move this week. In the UK, we've had to be content not just with underinvestment and the legacy of an antiquated infrastructure, but a similarly stuck-in-the-mud mentality to go with it. With an exhausting bureaucratic system, it's all too easy to choose the path of least resistance, with results that are at best a compromise and at worst wishy-washy. So what about good design? Something that as a director of dRMM Architects, I've spent my whole life trying to promote, and some of it trying to build. I find, however many times as an industry, though, we have built award-winning buildings, on time and to budget, there is still an underlying perception that good design is limited, if at all, to the world of architecture. When it comes to big infrastructure projects, forget about it. Clients think there is simply no time to include design or the money to afford it. So why can't we think big? Why aren't we delivering clever, cost-effective solutions to big projects? And if we do, why can't they look and feel good? Ironically, the truth is, we do, we are, and we can. Name any of the world's most pioneering work in infrastructure, and you'll find British talent involved at the highest level. And I'm not just talking rail, road, and aviation, but IT, energy, research, and engineering. Take my fellow commissioner at the National Infrastructure Commission, Dennis Hassabis. If any of you listened today to the Today programme, you will heard about his DeepMind company that have just beaten the Go champion with their artificial intelligence software, AlphaGo. It's a bit frightening, I know, but... The UK consistently then nurtures some of the best engineering talent and architectural minds in the world. And we still have both the maverick brilliance, I think shown by Charles, and the skills to imagine and design a better future. It's just much of the work has been done and it's taken elsewhere. And as a result, we have let some of our best talent go. Not willfully, but through our neglect of opportunities to make them stay. But the good news is we seem to be pulling ourselves out of our infrastructure inertia and in instilling an ethos of good design that will hopefully begin to shape our future for the better. For example, take the Mayor's London's 2050 plan. It has imagination, ambition, aplenty. By building on the successes, such as the Jubilee Line extension, St Pancras, projects in the pipeline, such as Crossrail and HS2, add in some of the major regeneration projects taking place within our cities, then you can see that we are beginning to push through the sort of big projects that have long been the concern of other countries. We're beginning to grasp that infrastructure isn't just about the physical. It's about our attitude towards how the world works, our place in it, and how that is embodied in the things that we build. Reimagining our infrastructure is one of the greatest opportunities we have to move resolutely towards a better future and to put a healthier, more compassionate, and greener philosophy into place. So how, as an industry, can we help do that? It's difficult, I think, not to be overwhelmed by the enormous task of making the UK's infrastructure fit for the 21st century. It's becoming increasingly evident to me that many large organisations, businesses, and even policymakers just don't have the skills to think like that. But then why should they? With such huge pressures to deliver on time and to budget, and all too often armed with the misnomer that imagination and design can increase both, it's easy to take that well-trodden path of least resistance. It is my experience that only with a collective effort that such opportunities can be pushed through. The bringing together of those talented individuals who already have the ability and skill to imagine the future and then connect them together. My role as chair of the independent design panel at HS2 has been to pull such a group of people together. Over 300 people of the highest caliber applied to be part of the panel, and I think that just shows the level of interest for such a role within the infrastructure environment. The resulting team of 45 not only have the imagination, but also an extraordinary wealth of talent, knowledge, and skills across a diverse range of disciplines. With the support of such groups through mentoring, advising, and inspiring, panels such as these can help organisations like HS2 to imagine the future in a way that is both coherent and progressive, with a real understanding of the value and benefits of good design. The government has also taken notice of the need for collective big thinking. The establishment of the National Infrastructure Commission aims to enable long-term strategic decision-making to build effective and efficient infrastructure for the UK. The experience of our building and places, I think, speaks to our national identity. They say something about who we are and what we're good at. My contribution to both the NIC and the chair of the Independent Design Panel is to offer an alternative human perspective to that of the GVA, one that connects the vision and economic arguments to the people, and that promotes the benefits of good design. Successful design is not just about aesthetics, but an enjoyable experience of life. And it is just that's just what I think we have to remember and be encouraged to do at all times. So as we move into a year where infrastructure and big projects are the buzzword, let's make sure that a sense of imagination and great design is embedded from the get-go. There is a huge willingness and ability within the design industry to help and make this happen, but it will only do so with a collective vision and the belief. The success of the games makers just shows what collective belief in something can do. We need to get back onto the front foot and make sure that from procurement through to delivery, design is not sidelined. The path of least resistance is more often than not longer and bumpier than one that cuts through the crap by virtue of a strong purpose and clear design intent. Our infrastructure project should engender national pride, matched by a sense of local ownership, from electricity pylons to flood defences, bridges to road signs. They need to be fit for purpose and sensitive to their context. They should be designed for the needs of the future, which arguably could mean not having them at all. While the power to initiate change may rest in the hands of a few, the power to push through rests in the willing hands of many. It is possible to recapture the spirit of the past and combine it with the best of our imaginative talent and design excellence today. As an industry, it's time to assert our combined talents, reclaim the infrastructure initiative, and help get, this is my finishing line, so I better get it right, and help the UK get its mojo back. Thank you.
Fantastic, two excellent talks, slightly different subject matter. We'll open up a conversation with everybody. I just wanted to start off by asking Charles, though, on the housing front, would it be best if all houses were designed by artists?
No.
Aesthetically, not structurally.
Well, I'd like to see some. I think it would be helpful if more houses were designed by architects, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's surprisingly large number aren't. And I think it comes back to, Sadie's point about where, a certain sort of meanness really in the aspiration and a sort of pushing out of design as somehow a risk or something that's kind of the least important bit. And, design's fantastically important in all sorts of profound ways. I talked a lot about decoration, and I'm always aware there's a danger that people then think, oh, that's the bit you do at the end. And hopefully both projects I show, but all sorts of other projects by other people that I could talk about. The spatial organisation of housing, the way that they're grouped in the city, all sorts of things that architects do which somehow kind of often go unnoticed but are really profoundly important. From the humble layout of the interior to how it sits in the city. So I think, to be honest, I'd say yes, it would be great if a few did, but I'd like to see more. I'd like to see architecture just profoundly more involved in the design of the built environment. That sounds a paradoxical thing to say, but it's true.
Well, I totally agree. Did you see that comment in the Times today that there are more high-rises going through plan commission in London at the moment than high-rises have ever been built in London before? So the landscape's changing, and just how many architects have been involved with that and how much of a coherent idea it is is an issue and it's a worry. And I was going to ask you, Sadie, on your side, are you saying that Brunel is the exemplar? Is he the one we need to look to for combining correctly the mixture of, practical engineering and wonderful aesthetics?
I think it's about ambition, and for me, it's not necessarily about Brunel, but it's embodied in the work of Brunel. It's embodied within work that the belief or the need plus the belief of the Victorians to put an infrastructure in place that is absolutely beautiful. If you go down to the sewers, they are magnificent,
yes.
And they're extraordinary feats of engineering, they're extraordinary feats of architecture in a way that is combined. So there was a belief that, putting together those disciplines made for something wonderful. I think what's happened nowadays is that there's sort of silo mentality that actually, X project can be done just with engineers and Y can be done just with architects. There's such a combined brilliance and ability and skill within the creative industries. We have to get back to putting them together and to making sure that those ideas, those great ideas, are actually picked up on.
What happened? How did they get split asunder?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have no great answer for it. I think it's a lot to do being brought up in the 80s from a communist background, I would obviously blame it on Thatcher, but I won't. It's a collective sensibility that's missing. It's a belief that together, we are better than the sum of our parts. And for a long time, I think that sort of glue that's held us together has been broken apart. And we need to make sure that, as an industry, as a group of creatives, that we kind of get our voice back. And we say it is important, if you're investing £100 billion, to make sure that whatever it is, it's going to be lasting 150 years. Like the structures of Brunel are beautiful. They are fit. They fit within their context. They're not shy or embarrassed. They're celebratory. And we've got such an amazing opportunity coming up. We have to grab it.
Okay. Who would like to ask a question in the audience? You just have to put your hand up. It's not to go. You would like to? This gentleman here. Yeah, you've got a microphone coming to you.
Yes, it's working. I had a question which I'm not an architect, so it may already be happening, but is there a stronger case for when building, houses and flats, that all the partitions within should be removable easily so you can adapt?
Did everybody hear that? Should houses and flats be more flexible with their interior space?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's a really important aspect of housing. Housing that is successful over a long period of time, so you might think about the sort of Georgian Victorian terrace, or maybe certain kinds of suburbia, tend to be successful because they're very adaptable, and they've adapted to different family forms and changing circumstances, and that they tend to work a lot better, I think, than housing which is very specific and bespoke. I think for a long time architects got very excited about mass production and an idea of housing as sort of pods that could be stacked up and all sorts of things like that. And there are some advantages to that, but they also are very hard to subsequently adapt. I mean, I lived in a block of flats that was made from essentially porta cabins stacked up using that technology. One of the things about that, it's actually quite a nice flat, but you couldn't ever change anything because each wall was structural as well as the external envelope. So yeah, I think the idea that you can change stuff is really important. I think also sometimes, oddly, if you spend too much time obsessed by the mechanism by which things can change around, it actually ends up being remarkably rigid. So I think a kind of loose fit is quite important. And yeah, the best housing tends to have a looseness which allows people to change it.
Okay, great. Another question from the audience. This gentleman here in the middle.
Thank you. Question for Sadie. Will your panel be challenging some of the basic assumptions of HS2? It's a controversial project, as I'm sure a lot of people here know. And the planning of it, the routing of it, the network effect of it, is that something that falls within your remit?
Okay, so just again, if anybody didn't hear that, the question is, does it fall within Sadie's remit as the design chair of HS2 to challenge some of the basic presumptions and assumptions on which it's being built? So that the lines, where they're going, how they're getting there, maybe even the Liverpool connection. Can you get down to basics like that, or you've got to keep your nose out?
Well, for the first phase that's going through Parliament, the answer is no, in terms of the basics, routes and so forth, because that's already been set. It's in the sense that it's been, we couldn't change that. We are, however, in a position to have a discussion or have the ability to advise on the design benefits or not of the second phase in a very limited way. I think the positive thing is that HS2 understand that having a conversation that is wider than just about how a line goes from X to Y, but talks about the potential impact that in ways that they may not have thought about is something that they are open to. But the process is happening very, very quickly. I think where we can add most value is by trying to make sure that the procurement, for instance, is correctly weighted, that that moving forward, that we're involved as much as we are possible. So we have oversight, but and we're able to comment. But I would say it's fair to say in the actual laying down of the route, we have limited influence.
Sadie, are we hearing a little bit of frustration in your voice? Are you wishing you could get a little bit more involved, that design was a little bit more integrated, and maybe not? I'm feeling a bit on the margins.
I'm frustrated in that I think having had the input much earlier on, if the panel had been set up right, way back, then yes, I think we could have had some significant impact. But that's not to say that I think this is the earliest a design panel has ever been involved on a project like this. So we can't harangue HS2 for the lateness of the panel. In a sense, it's much earlier than a panel such as this has ever been put in place. So if we can learn from anything, we should learn for the next time to make sure that designers and thinkers are able to input right from the beginning.
HS3, you mean?
HS.
Yeah.
HS,
another question from the floor. Over there at the back, gentleman in the blue shirt.
I cycled here, which I've got to say was a profoundly alienating experience. What I found as I was cycling here is that the infrastructure certainly wasn't in line with my thinking and my way of being transported here. And what I'm trying to kind of understand is how can we have all these wonderful new infrastructures if we still, as a society, worship the car and all that means. Because the car in itself is the embodiment of everything, which is, to a certain extent, I'm sounding a bit like a preachy cyclist, but it embodies all the kind of selfishness of society, if you like, getting back to the 80s and Thatcher and all that. So it's very difficult not to hold on to that as a way of choice, a way of life. And I think that is the thing that's stopping us moving on. What do you think about that? Sorry, it's a terrible kind of mixed up question.
So again, I think that the question there, if I may paraphrase you, is
Yes,
there a hierarchy when considering major infrastructure projects, which sees planes, trains and automobiles put at the very top, and things like walking and cycling and those sort of more environmental issues pushed to the side?
I would hope not. I mean, I think part of the role of the National Infrastructure Commission is to be able to take a holistic strategic view. And the most important thing is that it's not just about now, it's about 5, 10, 20 years ahead. So we have to start thinking about a new, greener society. We have to start imagining a future where, the combustion engine isn't driving our lives. So, I would say that there isn't, there's priority given to projects that need sorting. Our railways need really consistent, thinking about, for instance. And so I wouldn't say hierarchy, but I would say if you take any positive out of this, it would be that there is a group of us who are trying to think and look to the future and how that might impact the building of our infrastructure going forward.
That's very good for you, because you're on the right side as far as I'm concerned. But for the majority of people, I mean, a lot of people came by car here, which is I find a little bit contradictory because we're in a kind of Ecobuild. But that kind of, I suppose, it's our lifestyles that need to change.
Yeah.
And but what comes first, in a sense? If people aren't ready to make that life change, like lifestyle change. And you can't force people to do it, can you? If
So
they don't feel the desire to do it, then how are we going to move on?
A chicken and egg question. What comes first, the infrastructure or the change of lifestyle?
I think if you look at any of, if you look at any of the policies from trying to cut the number of cars in development, housing developments, to having, carless, some in central London, carless housing developments, there is a sort of push to encourage people to walk, to use public transport rather than cars. I'm a great believer in the next generation, I have to say. I think that, there's a huge amount of understanding and knowledge that is pushing through and wish for things to change. So I don't think there's any one thing that will make, there's no silver bullet to any of these issues or problems. It's incremental change. And I think that the wave is coming, and the wave is coming in terms of the next generation of thinking.
Okay, well, do you want to say something, Charles? Sorry.
No, not really. Only I came on the DLR, and I found that also a profoundly alienating experience. So it might just be something about coming to the Excel Centre.
Well, I think one of the things, it's quite interesting going back to Brunel, and and then you citing him, Sadie, and then looking at Charles's very idiosyncratic designs. Is one thing about sort of massive infrastructure projects is they could just lose any sense of locality.
Absolutely.
That I live in Oxford,
Yeah.
and there's a huge bit of infrastructure going in for HS2 there. And it's being done by a German company who couldn't give a tuppenny toss about the locals, which is fine, because I'm sure it's all being done at a really good price for the nation. But there is a lack of sensitivity, I think, for the local communities. And that's exactly what Brunel had. And he responded and reflected to those concerns and those environments. And if you do everything in a way which is corporate and national, without the sense of specifics to the local, I think you really lose something.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think that if there's one thing that we as a panel are consistently pushing is connect it back. Connect it back to those communities. How do you make sure that you do have a piece of infrastructure that talks of a national language but has a regional narrative? And I think, Charles's work does exactly that. It says, what is normal about our everyday? What is wonderful? It kind of, it highlights, ordinary life and the wonderful things about it, and takes it and makes it extraordinary in these beautiful pieces of work. So, I think that there is, if anyone can show us how to do it, Charles does, and talent like Charles, we don't have in abundance, but, we certainly have it.
We do, we absolutely do. Please, could you give a very warm round of applause for Charles Holland and Sadie Morgan?